Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. In this video I'd like to show you the 3 bead stitches involved to make the Ubuntu pendant. I haven't completed the pendant, so I can't show it to you. I've only done a few rows and only enough to be able to show you the different stitches involved. So to make all these different stitches, there's actually only 3 that you need to know, and those are the 3 that I'm going to show you. What you need to make this pendant is the string that's in your kit. You need the 6 colored beads that's in there. Of course, you also need your needle, and at the end when you're finished you also need the cord to actually connect the pendant and make a necklace out of it. So this is for the last part of the process. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you the 3 stitches involved. So I'm going to use some thread and the beads needed and follow the chart. So make sure you have the chart printed out. You can really follow along to make the pendant. I'm going to show you the 3 stitches involved to make this. The first one is the ladder stitch. That's for the base row. That's the widest point of the pendant, followed by a decrease brick stitch that will help you make this decrease, that you can actually grow this this diamond shaped, and the brick stitch, that's the one that's used in the middle to fill out these the pattern. So those 3 stitches are what I'm going to show you in this video. I have my beginning thread. I haven't taken too long of a bit because I just want to show you how the technique works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the first 2 beads on the center row, and that is 2 green beads. So I'm going to just pick up 2 green beads and put them on my needle. There we go, 2 green beads, and now I'm going to slide them onto the thread. See, there they are. I'm going to bring them about halfway. That's because during making the pendant we're going to first be working with the 1/2 and then with the other half of the thread. So I'm going to bring them about halfway, and now I'm holding them, both of them, in such a way that the working thread, the one that has my needle attached to that end, is the top thread, and the yarn tail with nothing attached to it is at the bottom. Now go through both of these beads from bottom to top, and this is a little, there we go, a little tricky. So from bottom to top through both beads, and then I'm just going to pull this through, and I'm just going to hold on to the beads, but then you don't see what I'm doing because I'm covering them with my fingers. I'm trying to do my best here. So I'm holding on to both beads, and then as I pull that tight, they're going to flip over. See that they want to flip over and come and sit next to one another, and that's exactly what we want. And so I'm going to just pull both threads a little harder, that they really flip and come and sit parallel next to one another. Push. And this is very fiddly when it's in the beginning end, but as your work gets larger this gets bigger. I flip them over. You see there they flip, and now I just hold on to this and just pull both threads there, and now they are nicely seated next to one another. There you go. And you've got both yarn tails pointing in the same direction, so they're both pointing down. That's important here. I've got one end is my working yarn tail, and the other end is the yarn tail that's not connected to anything. Just for the video purposes, I'm actually going to cut this other thread here, because that just makes it easier for me to keep track of which is which. And for example, the long yarn tail that you're not using, consider rolling it up and sticking it together with washi tape, for example. Then you can't accidentally get that all tangled and tied up. So these are your first 2 ladder stitches. We're now going to pick up the next colored bead in the base, and that's going to be a yellow bead. So I just quickly need to get hold of my yellow beads and put a yellow bead on my needle. There we go. I have a yellow bead on my needle. There it is. And I'm going to slip that down to my working position. And what's important at this point is you're going to look at the direction of the yarn. Now my working yarn is pointing down, and that means you're always going to be working in the same direction as the yarn. That means I'm going to insert my needle from top to bottom through that just the first bead. So through that bead, I'm going to insert my needle from top to bottom. So you're following the direction of the working yarn. So that goes down. That means you're also going to be pushing the needle in through the downward direction. And then what you see, what immediately happens is that yellow bead goes and snugly sits next to the green bead. And if you just pull that nice and tight, and then come back up through the yellow bead to complete the stitch. And there we go, just so through that yellow bead, then pull up through the top of the bead. You can see this really opens up here in the beginning, so you really need to pull this tight and make sure these, you see this beads, that yellow one just turned on me again. So make sure it's sitting next to the green bead, parallel, and then really pull that thread tight. And don't worry about that first green bead. That one will always just want to be different and just be a little bit out of direction. At a certain point when you're going to be working with this first yarn tail, that one will sort itself out. So now I've attached the third bead, that yellow bead. Time for the fourth bead. That's again going to be a yellow bead. So I'm again going to pick up a yellow bead on my needle. There I go, another yellow bead on my needle. I'm going to thread that back to my working position. So I'm just going to take that all the way back. And now again, look at the way that your yarn is pointing. Actually, we had it going up just a moment ago because I've now actually rotated my work. So if I keep holding it in the same direction, we had our working yarn going up. So now again we follow that working yarn in the same direction. So I'm inserting my needle from bottom to top in the same direction, following the working yarn. And pull this through, and as you do so, you'll see that second yellow bead just kind of snaps into position there. So again, pull this good and tight. It's really important that you pull that tight. And then to finish the stitch, the ladder stitch, you come down through that yellow bead that you've just attached. And then come down through that and pull to the bottom. And again, pull tight. Now you've got the first 4 beads on there. Next bead you're going to pick up is going to be an orange bead, because you're going to keep on building according to the scheme. I'm going to show you one more stitch, and then the rest really is just all a repeat, because these 2 yellow beads that I just showed you, that's the repeat. But I'll show you once more with the next bead, which is an orange bead. There you go, that's the orange bead on there. You can see the working direction of the yarn is pointing down, so I'm going to follow that working yarn. That means going through the top of this bead in the working yarn direction, like that. If you, for example, have your work rotated, that's no problem. You can easily just hold it the other way, but then still follow the direction of the yarn. So then you know, okay, I need to go that way through that bead. And where is the center of the bead? There we go. So you're following the direction of the yarn. Then you simply cannot go wrong. Then pull through. And I've got a bit of a knot there. pull through, and as you pull through you see that little bead just kind of snaps into place there, and then pull tight, and to finish off the stitch come back down, in this case through that orange bead. And now you've worked another ladder stitch bead, and after every stitch you see how it's opening up there. You want to prevent that. You really want to pull that tight just to get that base really secured, because the better your base is, the better the rest of your pendant is going to be. It will be a little wobbly, I mean that is to a certain degree inevitable, but do your utmost to get them as straight and as aligned as you possibly can. So now I've done the first 5 with you. Just like we've done this orange one, you're going to do the next orange one, and then the pink and the purple and the blue, until you have the entire edge done. And if you have that entire edge done, if I look at this little piece I have here, that's base row, so the bottom of this triangle, that base row there, that's what you're building. You see those first 2 green are those 2, and those 2 are the yellow, and that's the first orange. So you're going to build this entire base until you get to that point, and then you're ready to start building the rest of these rows. After you've worked the base row, so you see there at the bottom you see my base row, you're going to start working rows of brick stitches, and I've already worked 3 rows here. And actually working each of those rows is exactly the same. You're just going to follow the chart to see which bead you use when. So what I'm going to show you is how to work the first one, then that's going to be a decreasing brick stitch, and then after that you're going to be working brick stitches until you get to the end of the row. So I'm going to be showing you those 2 stitches, a decreasing brick stitch and the normal brick stitch. What we're going to be doing is, first of all, even after you've just worked the one row, the row where you've done the base stitch, just flip your work, so you'll have to do this way, that you have your working thread pointing upwards. It's going to be this thread here. It'll actually be on this side of your work, because here's my end yarn tail, the one that's halfway through, and this is my working yarn at the moment. So make sure your working yarn is at the top and at the right side of your work if you're right-handed. So you're going to have to flip your work over. Especially it might be actually looking like this. So just flip your work up. I'm now going to show you the big first stitch. And actually to be working brick stitches, and what we're going to be doing in all of these stitches, is if you look at your stitch, you see between the stitches you've got the yarn thread, that's this thread, you've got them between your stitches, and we're actually going to be pushing the needle in between the 2 stitches underneath the little thread you have there. So if you look at your needle, you're going to be pushing it underneath and between 2 stitches, or two beads I should say. And that's how we're going to be making the brick stitches. Now, to make the decreasing brick stitch, we're going to pick up the first 2 beads in the chart. Now that's always going to be 2 green beads, because that's the outer edge of our work. So I'm going to pick up 2 green beads and bring them to my work. I now have 2 green beads on my working yarn, and I've brought them to my to the row where I'm at. So I've brought them all the way down. Now to make the first stitch, this decreasing stitch, we're going to be inserting our needle underneath the working yarn, and that's been here between the beads, especially here you can really see that little bridge. It's like a little bridge that you have between the beads. And what we're going to do is we're going to be inserting our needle between beads numbers 2 and 3. So you see this is the second green one and the first yellow one. So in between those 2 underneath the thread, insert my needle, and then pull this completely through until the yarn is tight. There you go. And what you see happens is that that second bead will flip over and come down. That's exactly what you want. So now you've got them parallel next to one another. The next part of the decreasing brick stitch is to insert your needle through this second bead, so that one there, through this bead from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. So you see, so through that bead, that second bead there, from the bottom to the top, and pull the yarn through. Then the needle comes back through the first of those two beads from the bottom to the from the top to the bottom, and again pull through. To complete the decreasing brick stitch, the needle goes again through the first bead from the bottom to the top, through that first bead. And this is the point where you've completed the stitch, which means pull everything real tight. You see it's still a little bit wobbly there, so I'm just going to hold my finger on everything and then just pull that yarn real tight and help those, there we go, you can just feel them kind of pulling in, help those two stitches to, or those two beads to just get into position. That is a decreasing brick stitch. You're going to be doing that only on the first two beads of every row. So these two green beads I've done with the decreasing brick stitch. The rest of the row is going to be normal brick stitch. So every start of the row you do what I just did with these two green beads. The next stitch we need to work in every row is a brick stitch. Now if you look at the chart, the next bead that should come here is a yellow bead. So I'm going to pick up a yellow bead and bring it to my working position. Got that yellow bead at my working position, and now we're going to go through the loops between the stitches that comes next. In this case, my next two stitches are these two yellow beads, and I'm going to insert my hook exactly between those two underneath the thread that's already there in between them. So I'm going to insert my hook really underneath the thread between the two beads, and then pull yarn through there. And what's going to happen is this yellow bead is going to flip over. You see there, it flips over and comes down. To finish the brick stitch, you're going to go back up through the bead from the bottom of the bead to the top. There we go. And then pull your yarn through and pull tight. And you want to pull this one really nice and snug, because that's going to position that yellow bead properly. There you go. That was a brick stitch. You're going to do exactly the same on the next stitch and the next and the next until you're here to the end. The last one is going to be two green beads. You're going to be working just in that last loop there where my nail is. You're going to be working the last brick stitch. You can see how this pattern builds up. I'll show you once more the brick stitch. So I'm going to pick up another yellow bead because that's the next one in the chart. You can see I've picked up another yellow bead, and now we're going to connect this bead to the next bridge that's here to the bottom. So you've got there that orange bead and the yellow bead. In between those two, I'm going to push my needle underneath that thread that's there, just between the two beads. And then I'm just going to pull the needle through. And as we do this, it's curling a bit here. I've got a bit of a knot there. I'm just going to take that out of the thread. And the knot is out and the bead is in its position again. And to finish this brick stitch, I'm going to go through the bottom to the top of the bead and pull the thread through. There we go. And important here, you see how I pull that tight, that you kind of snap that bead into position there. And that's the second brick stitch we just made. So we've made the those two yellow brick stitches, because those first two were a decreasing brick stitch. You're going to continue this until you're here. Then just follow the chart with which color bead to use when. When you get to the end of the row, turn your work, so then you're going to flip it the other way, because then your working yarn will be on this side here, and then go back. Start with two decreasing bricks, with a decreasing brick stitch, so you'll be working two at once, and then work one brick stitch at a time, and continue this until you're at the top, until you've reached the pyramid of the top half of the diamond. When you've completed all the stitches and you've followed the chart, your pendant will look like this, a beautiful diamond pendant, shiny with the glass beads. To finish the necklace, I'm going to refer you to the photo tutorial that's available on Dedri's website, lookatwhatimade.net. I'll place a link to that tutorial in the video description. Brings us to the end of this instruction video. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.